As we look back on the last year and a half that the division has been in existence, it has gone through 7 major content releases, and with Update 1.8 having already launched and proving wildly successful, I thought it would be interesting to take a look at the past 7 updates and touch on the highs and lows of each content release. Each update brought new content and meta changes, and although they were not all met with universal praise from the community, they have all contributed in some way, shape, or form to where we are now. So, without further delay, let's jump right into episode 6 of this series and take a quick look back at Update 1.6. What's going on, agents? It's LtBuzzLitebeer, and in today's Division video, I decided to take a trip into the past of my beloved Tom Clancy title and touch on some of the changes that Update 1.6 brought to the live game. Now, this is episode 6 of this series, and in case you missed the first 5 episodes, where I reviewed updates 1.1 through update 1.5, I will leave a link to those past episodes in the video description below. Update 1.6, also known as Last Stand, went live on February 28, 2017 for all platforms and brought a nice variety of changes involving most aspects of the game. At the heart of Update 1.6 was the dedicated PvP mode known as Last Stand that pitted players into an 8v8 domination-style game mode. Using the existing Dark Zone as the backdrop for this combat arena, Last Stand divided the DZ into 4 smaller portions, and players were tasked with fighting to control 3 key tactical locations, with each of these 3 locations divided into 3 objectives. Once the tactical location was secured, the controlling team would start accumulating points, with the first team to max score winning the match. In addition to controlling these 3 locations, powerful fortifications and shade tech tactical boosts were available across the map that could provide buffs to a team looking to maximize their chances of winning. Last Stand was not PvP specific, as it also combined a PvE element with hordes of NPCs randomly spawning throughout the map that could provide a team with shade tech for kills, and could also add a third enemy element into a gunfight if not dispatched quickly. Behind the scenes of this new game mode was a newly introduced gear normalization mechanic that would instantly raise all gear scores to 256 and gear attributes to maximum values, including main attributes, all bonuses on gear and performance mods, weapon damage including native talents, and armor was raised to maximum values of 35%. A new incursion, Stolen Signal, was introduced in Update 1.6, which took place in a civilian TV broadcast center taken over by the Rikers gang. Differing from the previous incursions in format, Stolen Signal would task players with tackling 3 separate encounters within the studio, each with its own bosses and mechanics, before finally unlocking the final encounter. Essentially a lengthy hostage rescue, Stolen Signal pushed players outside of their comfort zones by requiring them to use different gear sets and tactics than they had used in previous incursions, all while introducing a multitude of new wrinkles into both the environment and bosses. The Dark Zone received sweeping changes, including the addition of 3 new areas to the north of the existing DZ, and these new zones brought in many new landmarks and were exclusively inhabited by elite-level NPCs. These new areas feature some of the most feature-rich textures and detailed environments the Division has ever seen, and once explored, a player could truly get a grasp on just how devastating the green poison virus affected this area of the map. Also included in this update was a new leaderboard system for the Dark Zone, which introduced weekly and monthly activities tracked via an interactive leaderboard. The higher your cumulative Dark Zone score, the better rewards you would earn when the leaderboards reset. Also introduced were Dark Zone contamination events, where agents could attempt to clear subway portions of the Dark Zone versus powerful cleaner hordes and bosses, all while managing their health as the virus degraded the integrity of their filter. Clearing these contaminated Dark Zone subways of cleaners would lead to extra rewards for the player capable of weathering this tough environment. Fast traveling between Dark Zone checkpoints was first introduced to allow players the ability to fast travel between zones, and a new PvP mechanic was introduced, and that a player would no longer lose Dark Zone experience or funds when killed in the DZ if they were not rogue. Dark Zone supply drops would now reward players with Dark Zone experience in addition to loot, and Koreatown was officially declassified as a recognized landmark. Legendary difficulty was added to Napalm Production Site, Warngate Power Plant, and Times Square Power Relay missions, pitting you and your squad up against elite LMB forces equipped with superior gear and advanced combat tactics. Legendary missions removed all mission narrative and focused solely on the combat, and these missions would feature only one checkpoint, roughly halfway through the mission, and could only be attempted in World Tier 5. For the squad that successfully completed these missions, they were immediately rewarded with an exotic tier cache that guaranteed an exotic gear piece or weapon. General combat received quite a few changes, with revive times being raised from 3 to 5 seconds. Bleed status effects would no longer block sprint, but would instead reduce movement speeds by 20%, with additional applications refreshing the timer. Medkits would now be available to use while at full health and cleanse the character of all applied status effects, and a short delay was coded into the game between combat rolls. Hipfire received 3 changes, with Hipfire stability being significantly reduced while moving. Weapon bullet spread was now wider and recoil was more pronounced, and the player camera would now be impacted by Hipfire, reducing the player's field of view the longer they kept firing. Body shot damage was slightly increased in PvP, with headshot damage remaining the same, and the PvP damage multiplier was now set at 0.42 for both Last Stand and the Dark Zone. And finally, a new visual feedback was introduced for when an enemy player used a medkit. Armor, which was so necessary in Update 1.5, was removed as a major bonus from gear items and mods and was replaced with health. Base health was added to the game, and based on the world tier you selected, would receive a given amount of base health. A new Resist All bonus was added to the game, which added resistances to all types of status effects, with it being capped at a value of 60%. Resistance to status effects would now operate with 2 mechanics, with percentages indicating how much the damage effect would be reduced and how long the duration would be shortened of said status effect. When applied repeatedly over a short time, a player would naturally build up a resistance to the status effect, and if a player manages to build up 100% resistance to status effects, they will resist it entirely. And Rejuvenated would now give a 40% resistance to all status effects for 10 seconds when using a medkit. Many changes were implemented into this update, including gear bonuses being moved around on various gear pieces, including the chest piece, losing damage to elites and damage from elites, while gaining skill haste and enemy armor damage, backpacks losing skill haste and signature skill resource gain while gaining weapon stability, masks losing damage to elites while gaining enemy armor damage, gloves losing damage to elites while gaining enemy armor damage and skill haste, knee pads losing damage to elites and damage from elites while gaining enemy armor damage and skill power, and the holster losing damage from elites and pistol damage while gaining critical hit chance and reload speed. Other changes to gear included enemy armor damage being switched from a minor to major bonus, damage to elites being changed from a major to minor bonus, and damage to elites values being halved, and pistol damage on gloves being doubled. Gear sets received quite a few changes, starting off with the defense 4-piece bonus being changed so that no skill mod would be active when having the ballistic shield equipped, and it would no longer remove crit hit chance from your weapon. In addition, if the player ran out of ammo for their SMG, it would now automatically switch over to their sidearm. Reclaimer was completely reworked from squad consumables over to exclusively support station range, duration, and all mods active at the same time. Alpha Bridge had its 4-piece bonus modified so that it would now only provide the 3rd or free talent of the unused weapon instead of all 3, and all talents would ignore unlock requirements. Tactician's Authority had its 2-piece bonus increased from 10% to 15% skill haste, and its 4-piece bonus would now consume the skill power buff on skill use instead of after 10 seconds. The Deadeye 4-piece bonus would now only work with zoomed scopes, and finally, Banshee Shadow 4-piece bonus was completely reworked so that while Rogue, all ammo was completely refilled every 30 seconds, with damage taken from non-rogue players being reduced by 10%, remaining intact. While not rogue, damage to rogue players was increased by 10%, with this bonus being increased to 20% for 10 minutes after being killed by a rogue. Skills and changes to skill power were prominent in Update 1.6, with the skill power curve being modified, resulting in less efficient skills at low skill power and more efficient at high skill power levels. Skills would now level to your world tier, and diminishing returns on skill power would not take effect before 450,000 skill power, with all skills being adapted to this new scaling method. Skill haste gear bonuses were increased by 100%, with skill haste being capped at 50%. Many changes were made to skills, including a detonation delay added to the sticky bomb, a 2-stage healing rate for first aid, turret ranges were reduced, mobile cover cooldown increased by 33%, reductions to pulse impacts for crit hit chance and crit hit damage, smart cover resilience reduced by 33% with base cooldown rates being increased by 9%, Seeker Mines receiving a PvP damage modifier set to 40% to reduce its potency, and Cluster Mines stagger effect was removed, while explosion damage was decreased with bleed damage being increased. Support station radius was reduced while revive times were increased from 3 to 5 seconds, and heal procs would now have a 1-second cooldown. And finally, signature skills would now have a minimum 60-second delay between applications, up from 30 seconds, with players unable to trigger a new signature skill while still under the effects of this mandatory cooldown period. Signature skill cooldown would now be affected by skill haste, and Tactical Link had its damage bonus increased in Last Stand only by 10%, with the weapon stability bonus being hindered by the rate of fire bonus. Character talents were slightly modified, with On the Move reduced to 15%, Battle Buddy being reduced to 30%, Critical Save being reduced to 20%, and Adrenaline would no longer apply Overheal. Many changes were made to loot, with named high-end weapons now becoming exotics, with a new item color designating their rarity. Exotic caches were introduced into the game, with these caches guaranteeing an exotic item when opened. The Phoenix credit cap was raised from 2,000 to 5,000, and the scavenger box in the base of operations would now properly scale to the player's world tier. Weekly assignment caches would now guarantee an exotic item. Exotic items sold at vendors had their prices increased, and finally, gear set items had their prices lowered to be equivalent to high-end gear. Crafting recalibrations on gear and weaponry would now be unlimited, as long as the player had the necessary funds, with the recalibration costs increasing at first, but eventually capping out at a set cost. The base damage on all weapons was decreased to balance correctly with the reduced damage mitigation from the changes to armor, with NPCs also being affected by this change in order to preserve pre-1.6 time to kill and time to be killed values. SMGs received a change to their native weapon talent, and that crit hit damage was removed and changed back to crit hit chance. Cool-Headed received a small cooldown, Provident was reduced from 60% to 10%, and the L86 had its base damage increased by 4%, while its damage fall-off at range was reduced by 40%. Named weapons received a list of sweeping changes, starting off with the addition of a preset unique talent in the 3rd free slot. The other 2 weapon talents would be rolled randomly from the list of talents available to this weapon type, and this change was implemented retroactively to any named weapon in the game. Furthermore, the unique weapon talent could not be recalibrated, and these exotic talents could not be transferred to the other weapon when using Alpha Bridge. Exotic weapons received a unique descriptive lore text in their UI, and some exotic weapons would now function as gear sets, and that their unique talent would only unlock when 2 specific exotic weapons were equipped. The FAMAS was now an exotic weapon, renamed the Bullfrog, and its unique talent remained as Uncomplicated. The Tommy Gun received the Carefree weapon talent, the Medved Center Mass talent, the Hungry Hog, Glutton, the Tenebrae, Lights Out, the Pecan weapon talent, the Cassidy, Boomstick, the Urban MDR, distracted weapon talent and a base damage increase of 65%, the Warlord, Play Rough, the Thompson M1928, Carefree, the Damascus, Quick Draw, the Golden Rhino weapon talent, the Historian, History Repeats, Caduceus weapon talent, the Midas weapon talent, and the Showstopper received an 11% damage increase. In addition, the Liberator and Centurion could be combined to form the Free Republic weapon talent, while the Hilder and Air could be combined to form the Valkyrie weapon talent combo. And finally, small changes were made to the base game, in that civilians would now always drop target intel when helped, and collectibles would reward players with more XP when picked up at level 30. Survival had its loot caches modified towards more generic drops instead of weapons that were introduced in Survival. Reviving players in Survival would now cost a medkit, and matchmaking and solo PvP would now guarantee solo instances where grouping would not be possible. Players could no longer loot and kill other downed players in PvE Survival, and supplies available around the different spawn hideouts were rebalanced. The Underground was reprogrammed to now award players with Underground XP instead of normal XP, and the rewards for challenge and heroic incursions were increased. A further 30 bug fixes were introduced as part of Update 1.6, with some of my personal favorites being fixing a bug where players could accidentally use consumables while browsing the emote wheel, a bug where players would be unable to do anything for a few seconds after using a skill, a bug where players would be able to use consumables indefinitely, a bug where NPCs would often get perfect aim, and a bug where the nimble talents would revive the player from a downed or dead state. Overall, my impressions of Update 1.6 were one of excitement and overall enjoyment with the game. You see, I was now completely switched over to PC and was gradually getting used to the controls and enjoying every minute of game time. I had started making some of my build guides and full optimization guides, and they were met with generally good responses. In addition, I had been selected to attend ETF Charlie, but had to cancel at the last minute due to prior family obligations, so things were going well for me in terms of a player, YouTube content creator, and member of the Division community. The meta had now completely switched over from the uncomplicated Alpha Bridge Armor M4 Boredom Fest to skill power and skill haste, and I had all sorts of fun experimenting with funky combinations of gear sets spec'd heavily into electronics and skill power. The new Dark Zone areas were truly epic, and I remember simply walking around the new areas completely overwhelmed by the environment and attention to detail. Now, I'm not much on third-person PvP, but Last Stand was fun in short bursts and was badly needed for the game to evolve and attract back players that had left due to it not being available in the game prior. Stolen Signal was a royal pain in the ass, and I was relieved when I was finally able to complete a run-through with randoms and mark it off my checklist. And finally, I remember how wild those first few times attempting legendary difficulty missions turned out. Experiencing those fast-moving LMB with their enhanced battlefield tactics, marksman-level aim, and one-shot melees was something that I still love attempting every week, and the guaranteed exotics were the icing on the cake. This is going to wrap up episode 6 of this quick look back on the history of the Division's updates, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this look into the past. If you could take the time to rate the video with a huge thumbs up, it would be greatly appreciated. If you want some more of my Division content in your lives, please take the time to hit that sub button and follow me on Twitter. Until my next The Division video, this has been LtBuzzLitebeer saying peace out.